Welcome to this November World Satsanga being held on the 30th of November 2017 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and The Moore Show. And again, I thank Kevin for broadcasting the World Satsanga audio and putting some wonderful images towards it on his own website. That is his own YouTube site as well. Kevin at the moment, by the way, is in the States interviewing a number of different individuals for his spiritual / metaphysical documentary that's going to be called They Call Us Channelers. And I may have mentioned last time that I was fortunate enough to be the first person to be interviewed, specifically because I was in the UK. But right now he's got a number of individuals in the States that he's currently interviewing to help create that spiritual / metaphysical documentary about people who are in contact with and work with the greater reality. So thank you for that, Kevin. With all my heart, you're doing a wonderful job there. If you look at his YouTube site, look up Kevin Moore on his YouTube site. He's got some quite good bits of footage that he's taken already, where he's been doing some really quite informal interviewing with people who he's already interviewed, and you can see his progress and what he's doing. It's great. Okay, so back onto this particular Satsanga. For those of you who don't know, I've actually been on sabbatical and on a slight research trip. So I'll talk about the research part of it in the newsletter, which comes out in a couple of weeks' time. But basically, it's not really research in terms of what authors normally do. It's more about becoming immersed in the energies of the area, and it's looking for evidence that can be used as physical evidence for the greater reality, when all the, should we say, the human evidence around it points into being one thing. I'm looking for things that actually show it something else. And I found a number of those things as it happens in terms of some of the imagery and some of the hieroglyphs, specifically in a papyrus institution that was able to show me that lots of the things that are understood now in my own channelings were also understood in the Egyptian times as well. It's just the way that they were depicted was different, and how it's presented is different, and how it's understood now by Egyptologists isn't specifically relevant to or in keeping with my understanding about what these images are portraying, and the energies surrounding those images and what they're portraying in terms of what was being understood as the greater reality from their perspective right then. So in this trip to Egypt, I went through a number of different areas I've been to before, back in 2001 with Anne. Although I did things like Karnak Temple, the Luxor Temple, Pharaoh Temple, Esna Temple, went to Aswan, saw lots of stuff around there. And saw some of the sort of antiquities from a museum perspective, and also understood some of the ways in which the Egyptians worked. One thing that did strike me as being true, and this is that the level of architecture that they got, level of engineering prowess that they got, level of artwork that they got, and the language that they got, all tells you that they were an extremely advanced society. But mankind, or the Egyptologists, are telling us that these buildings were manufactured in a certain way and were put together in a certain way, which is basically a Neanderthal methodology. So when I look at all the evidence in front of me that suggests that there was much greater levels of technology, or should we say different ways in understanding how nature works compared to how we do it now, that's being used by the Egyptians then, and then look at the way in which Egyptologists are explaining how things are working based upon some of the information they got from the hieroglyphs, which doesn't give the information surrounding how pyramids or temples or other great building and architectural examples were being created. Tells me that the level of technology was really quite, I think, reserved for those individuals who were, for want of a better word, mature enough to be able to use it in a benign and benevolent way, rather than use it in a selfish way. So wonderful examples of how technology is being used and how it could be used to house ourselves and to understand how things are being worked. But I think the understanding of the hieroglyphs and the way that the gods are being depicted, or should we say the levels of nature are being depicted, is being totally misunderstood. So I think there's going to be something along these lines being described in the future book towards the end of my 12 books I've got to do. But right now I'm working on the curators. And interestingly enough, the first part of the curators does look at various different aspects of understanding of what God is and all the different hierarchy of beings that work with God. So I'm going to look at that in a bit more detail as a result of my recent visits, sort of refreshing my memory of what's in and out there. What was quite interesting was that the Egyptians haven't been slow in coming forward in monetarising their antiquities. When I went there in 2001, you could basically, most of these antiquities you could walk into without having to go through any tight turnstiles to pay for tickets. There was no sort of visitor centres there where you have to run the gauntlet of the people trying to sell you products and trash and trinkets on the way out. It was all very much open plan and easy to access and easy to get into. These days it looks like it's been clamped down, and areas that were previously unmanicured have now become very, very manicured in terms of being able to access these different antiquities. And maybe it should do, because Egypt is a very poor country and it's a very troubled country as well. And so they do need to have some form of income. And one of the ways that they can create this income, of course, is by monetarising their antiquities. It's just slightly unfortunate that the level of understanding of what those antiquities are hasn't improved over time. It seems to have gone backwards a little bit. Okay, so let's go look at the agenda of today's Satsanga. If I do cough and sputter a little bit, I do give you my apologies. It's just that I've been in a very closed environment in some of the locations I was at, and the air conditioning that I was experiencing was very inefficient and probably needed its filters changing. And so a number of us who were there managed to get ourselves, shall we say, some lung-based viral infections, or colds, if you want to call it that. But let's have a look at the work we're going to do today in terms of the agenda of this November Satsanga. So first of all, we're going to look at the difference between a being and an entity, just to revise our understanding, and say and really understand how a being can become an entity when we understand what the difference between a being and an entity is. Then I'm going to go through the participants' questions. And there's quite a lot of questions here, and don't forget that I don't actually read these questions beforehand and give a revised answer. What I do tend to do is just take it on the spot in the same way as I used to with the live Satsangas. So it makes it more of an on-the-spot and instantaneously channeled piece of information rather than a researched piece of information in terms of the answers to the questions. And then right at the very end, we're going to do a meditation to recreate communion and negate our desire for separation throughout the world, which I think is really, really important right now. Because although you'll see from the newsletter when it's released, that there is a great feeling, or I'm gaining a great feeling that we are starting to move, bottom out in our descent to the frequencies, our local descent to our frequency. And we're starting to move up the frequency. Next year there's going to be some movements up the frequency, and it's going to be quite notable for some people to experience this. And so this desire for being individualised and separated is a result of this dropping down lower than the frequencies. And the need for communion or oneness with others, and therefore oneness with God, is more of an indication that we are moving up the frequencies. So we'll work on that. Okay, so what's the difference between a being and an entity, and can a being become an entity? Well, in a previous Satsanga, I described that an entity was basically individualized sentience and a body of energy. And by a body of energy, I don't mean a human form or any other form. I mean it's just a group of energies that are used by that sentience to sort of house it or enable it to interface with and interact with the environments of the different frequential levels within the multiversal that it is working with, and the universal environments within the multiverse is working with. So an entity is basically sentient energy that's individualized and given a body of energy to work with. That is individualized from source, basically, or individualized from our true energetic selves. So the aspect is an entity. A shard is an entity because it's created from the shall I say the intelligent desire to individualize a part of us to experience something in parallel or tandem to that which is normally being experienced by the much larger piece of intelligence, or piece of sentience, and energy associated with that sentience. So entity is basically an individualization of sentience and energy that has been intelligently individualized by a larger piece of sentience and a larger piece of energy associated with that sentience. A being is something which is created as a result of if you want to call it that, the Darwinian evolutionary process of energies starting to group together, of like energies grouping together, rudimentary intelligence being created as a result of that. And that means the rudimentary intelligence means that the seeking out of similar or same or like energies. And then grouping together in bigger and bigger clumps until the intelligence grows and grows and grows as a result of those bigger and bigger clumps of energies, or like or similar types of energies, until eventually it becomes sort of rudimentary consciousness, sort of self-awareness, deliberate understanding and creation of various different things. And so we get to a point where that energy groups together to create bigger energies that gains intelligence, and then they seek out other energies with similar intelligences who sacrifice their individuality to create a bigger, more complex intelligent energy, which eventually starts to become self-aware, self-conscious, and understanding who it is and what it's doing, and therefore becomes creative. And as a result of becoming creative, starts to become sentient. If you look at the book, the last pages, I think around page 370 or something in the Origin Speaks, you'll see the process for how an energy can become sentient in its own right. So when an energy becomes sentient in its own right, of course that sentience is also capable of moving out of and away from the energy that gave birth to that sentience. In the same way as the sentience that is an entity can move away from and join into other energies if it wishes to. So the level of functionality between a being and an entity is the same. It's just the one is created through the individualization of that energy from a larger entity, whereas the being is a level of sentience created through sort of the Darwinian function of evolution. There are a number of different functions that an entity can do that a being can't, for instance. And so that level of description I can describe not now, but in a subsequent Satsanga. That recently came out in some of the text in the book I'm working on now, which is called The Curators, which, by the way, I think I've hit the 107,000 word mark, so it's already over the 330, 350 pages of a standard book size. So it's going quite well. It won't be finished, by the way, until around about June, July next year, and that'll be the text finished. Then there'll have to be some sort of continuing on with the residual editing there. And there's a wonderful lady called RM, who is also helping me out with that editing. And we work with it as we go along, so that's good. But basically, there are functions that are different between an entity and a being, specifically because of the way in which they've created or been assigned this sentience. And it's to do with not quite the status of that sentience, but more the power behind the sentience. Okay. So, in effect, they're both sentience, but the one is a being created through the standard evolutionary process, and the one is an entity created through individualization of a larger piece of sentience. Okay. Now, a being can become an entity only if that sentience is reused during a new, or the creation of a new evolutionary cycle. Now, we know that an evolutionary cycle is achieved when all entities that have been created by Source have experienced every part of the multiverse that they are given to work with, to experience, learn and evolve through. And when they've done that, then all the entities then start to move back into complete communion with Source, and the Source then withdraws its own sentience away from the energies within the origin that it's working with, and moves across to another group of energies and repopulates those energies with its sentience. And it's another set of energies, another location within the origin, and it starts to want to understand and experience those energies in an in-depth way. So then it starts to create whatever it wants to. It might create another multiverse, it might create something else this time, we don't know. But in essence, it'll then populate that environment within itself with smaller versions of itself to experience the minute detail of that environment. And so, in that way, it learns, it experiences and evolves in a faster way than it would do if it was just trying to do it on its own. Now, in that situation, those pieces of sentience that have evolved on their own and haven't been created by the Source can, should the Source decide, be re-invoked in individuality. Because when the Source accepts all of those entities that it's created back into communion, it also accepts all those beings that have been created through a function of evolution of energies. If he feels that some of those beings are useful enough or experienced enough, or will give a different angle on the understanding of the experience of the new energies, it will re-invoke the individuality of that sentience from itself that was the being. And in doing that, it assigns its entity status by default. So a being can become an entity if that sentience that's evolved is re-individualized into a new evolutionary cycle. And so that's how a being can become an entity. And of course, at that point, all of the sentience that is assigned into a new environment within a new evolutionary cycle has entity status. And so, as a result of this, there is nothing but entities. But of course, there will ultimately end up with a number of beings created through this new evolutionary cycle, because the energy that's in the environment that is the Source, in its new location, in its new population of its sentience and individualizations of its sentience within the energies that it's commandeered within the origin, can of course create the possibilities of the evolution of those energies that haven't got sentience into beings through the standard evolutionary process, as I've described. So, and again, in the next evolutionary cycle, they may well stand their chance of becoming entities as well. So this is a continuing product of sentience being created as a result of individualization from Source, and our trinetic selves and our aspects, if you wish to do so, and the creation of sentience through the evolutionary process of similar or like energies grouping together in harmony and seeking each other out and sacrificing their own individuality for a bigger and more purposeful condition where they can create a being which is a sentience rather than simply an intelligent or conscious energy. And then again, they will get reabsorbed at the end of the evolutionary cycle. And should the Source entity decide to use that sentience in its individualized state as a being in the next evolutionary cycle, it will become an entity by default. Okay, so that's the difference between us being an entity again and how a being can become an entity. It's a function of moving into and being reused in the next evolutionary cycle. Okay, so let's go through our questions now. We've got quite a few questions, so I'll have to see how we do, whether we carry some across into the next Satsanga. And some of these are quite long preambles, so you'll have to forgive me if I read a bit slowly here. First question is from MS in the far east, far east, over in the Australasian areas. And he said, "Hi Guy, I have a question about doubt and how it affects us, and also about forgiveness and how it affects us." Well, first of all, let me just work with forgiveness first rather than doubt. Forgiveness is a very, very powerful tool, and if we forgive somebody for wronging us, then we stop the chance of any connections or energetic connections being attached to us, specifically karmic connections between us and the individual who has created or given us or wronged us in some way, or created an environment that we think is not particularly appropriate to what we want to be experiencing. And so if we forgive them for what they've done to us or what they do to others, we remove this link with us and this link with them. And so we do them a favour by forgiving them, and we do ourselves a favour at the same time. And in essence, what happens is that means that individual can evolve faster as a result of it, because we've not gone down the route of creating a karmic link with them. So forgiveness is a really powerful tool for us all to use. Doubt, on the other hand, is very powerful in a different way. We can have the strongest convictions in the world, but if there's a slightest percentage of doubt within those convictions, then those convictions, or those belief systems, or those knowledge systems can start to fall apart. So any form of doubt at all, no matter how small and niggling, if it's 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of 1%, the power of 99, for instance, or should I say the square root of 99, or the root of 99, for instance, no matter how small it is, that level of doubt can affect the efficiency of something that we're trying to work with. A good example of this is healing. If the patient has any small doubt about the work that's being done, and they doubt the confidence in themselves or they doubt the confidence in the healer to do the healing, that doubt will create a negating effect on the work that's being done, or the possibility of somebody going down a certain route or achieving the link between certain event spaces to give them the path that they need to go down in a particular life. And so it could be that their chosen path or their chosen life plan may be affected by the doubt associated with being in a certain situation and not wanting to be in that situation because they don't understand that situation that they're in is part of their plan and will lead on to better things later, for instance. So doubt is a really powerful a negative thought process to have, and really when you're working with the spiritual and with the metaphysical, as long as you are, for want of a better word, in tune with the individual or the information that you're working with, then you should have no doubts about the effectivity, the correctness, or the legitimacy of that information that you're working with. And so the thing is to believe, but with a level of understanding of, not just blind belief, but believe with knowledge, and believe without that stuff which you are believing with knowledge, but in a way which has got no doubt associated with it. Okay, so these, very, very short questions, but very, very powerful questions and answers there as well. Okay, the next question is from US, which is over. The US is from the western part of the hemisphere, and it's a couple of questions. The first one is based upon the and dialogues, and it says, page 181, I discussed the process of manifestation, where desire is the prototype intention or wish that is followed by intention, thought and action, but there's no mention of emotions or feelings. There's a bit of a preamble here just to explain a few things that are understood in sort of wider spiritual environments. And so the Palladian guides our emotions fuel our thoughts into manifestation. We use our emotions as the fuel to attract the experiences that our mental bodies want, because our emotions are very powerful. They can slow down the manifestation process when we feel weak, inadequate, impatient, unlovable, and deserving, etc. The Buddha also said, what you think you become, what you feel you attract, what you imagine you create. So what is the role of emotion, energy in motion, or feelings, emotion attached to thought, in this manifestation process? It's different for human beings versus other incarnate entities. But does emotion, in brackets the passion or heart's desire, only play a part in three-frequential existence? Is emotion also used in the higher frequencies, or is it more frequency-based focused manifestation in the rest of the physical universe? Emotions or feelings are basically a level of sensory perception and therefore an expression of language that is only really available to us in the incarnate state. And it's something that we as incarnate human beings are experiencing at a more profound level because of our individualized free will. So, is it different for human beings versus other incarnate entities? The answer is yes, because we are working on a lower frequency. We start to feel the doubts and the feelings and the desires and the wants and the needs associated with low frequency existence, and therefore those things that create karma because we're here. And so other entities that are incarnate generally have a level of community associated with any free will they may have, or communal type of connectivity as well. So the levels of emotions associated by, or associated to their levels of thoughts and behaviours and actions and creativity isn't anywhere near as intense as what we experience. So really, I would say that emotions could create a very difficult process of creation because of they're unstable. Emotions are particularly unstable. So if we use emotion in our creativity process and we don't achieve what we wanted to create, then we start to become dissatisfied. And so the emotion behind the creativity starts to loop backwards and decreate that was created. So we go in a downward spiral. So the use of emotions or feelings in creativity is not desirable. And we should always end up with a detached state of beingness when we are in creation. And in fact, when we're experiencing anything, we should be in a detached state of beingness. Because remember, this is a reality which doesn't exist. This is only here for us to experience, learn and evolve in this particular environment. And so being immersed in or subsumed or consumed by sensory perceptions that are only available to us whilst incarnate on the earth is karmic. And so we really want to detach ourselves from them. When you start to become more and more spiritual, you start to become more and more detached from this particular environment, because you realise on a very profound level, and you know on a very profound level, that this is not the reality that we exist in normally. This is only a transient condition, simply an interactive play, if you want to call it that we use to be able to experience, learn and evolve. All aspects of potential evolutionary accelerants that are available to us in this particular frequential level. So my advice is that when you go above certain levels, you don't get these levels of emotion. You become really detached and very almost matter-of-factish, but you still engage with individuals on this level if you're really connected whilst incarnate. But you are more thoughtful, more caring, more understanding, and more considered in how you respond. There's no anger involved, there's no joy involved, other than the overall joy of being connected to every other entity that's created by Source and the Source itself, and ultimately the origin. So the negative sides of emotions, the human sides of emotions, don't manifest. Okay, so we shouldn't use them. There's no place for emotions in creativity, because emotions create disappointment. That's a downward spiral. Okay, next question is, recently scientists use a technique called mirography to determine that the Great Pyramid, Khufu, contains a great void within it. They believe that the pyramid was constructed during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu between 2509 and 2483 BC. The big void identified in Khufu's Great Pyramid in Giza is in BBC News, and there's a link here that will be available to the reader of the transcript, by the way. So it'd be interesting to see. Next, the question associated with this from US is, when were these pyramids really built? Have they always been stationary, or could they be moved around like the Earth and the Moon were? What is the purpose of the voids in these angled shafts within them? Some people call them star shafts, act as portals to Sirius, Orion, Ursa Minor, Alpha Draconis, and other star systems. If true, are these shafts used in spiritual and physical, i.e. frequency band 4 to 7, or purely energetic portals? What did you discover in my recent research trip to Egypt? Well, I didn't go to the pyramids, but I've been there previously, in 2001. And my understanding is that they are used for the amplification of, and the generation of, and the storage of specific energies. They also were able to house various different instruments of energetic manipulation. The pyramidal design being such that the dimensions and the ratios between the dimensions were particularly good at, shall I say, housing those energies or shielding those energies from their ability to leak into the outside world, so to speak. The shafts were basically ways in which the energies could be, for want of a better word, projected or pulled in. Some of the locations of the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber were areas where energies could be collected, so to speak. And so, although there are voids in there, those voids were areas where energy was collected. Think of, if you can, some of the machines we have now to try to create nuclear fusion, where we have these great big spheres or toroids or whichever technology that's being used by various different groups to try to contain all of the energies associated with the fusion-based reaction. So the fusion-based reaction is potentially catastrophic. The sun's created through fusion. We have fission to do what we do. The fusion is a difficult one, and containing the energies in a state of fusion is the sort of holy grail in terms of limitless power. And so some of these energies that were being dealt with the pyramids needed to have something that would contain them, that would allow them to be amplified, would allow them to manifest, would allow them to be used. And so the dimensions of the pyramids and the size and shapes of the blocks and the material that were being used were specifically created for the manipulation of these energies. And a lot of the machinery, if you want to call it that, or the instruments that were being used to control them have disappeared. They've gone. They were made sure that they were removed from the possibility of it going into the wrong hands, so to speak. So a lot of the stuff that was there to create the rifts in frequential levels, to allow the manifestation of energies and capture them within the pyramids, is not available to us right now. We may well discover various ways of doing it in the future. I'm being told we will do, but with our current reliance on technology, rather than reliance on understanding and using natural phenomena and natural methodologies and natural processes, such as telepathy, for instance, or telekinesis to be able to control things, we're going to be using mechanised means for a long, long time, until we start to work out that mechanised means are slow and are simply things like computers, telephones, televisions, and all these other devices. For instance, hydroelectrics, solar electrics, nuclear electrics, coal-based electrics, turbine-based electrics. All these different ways of creating energy are simply really, for want of a better word, cumbersome. The best way I can think of it. Cumbersome in how to deal with, how to create energy. When we use the right level of natural means, using the right geometries and the right materials, we can attract these energies and manifest them and amplify them in ways that are well beyond the use of the vastest and most complete levels and most advanced levels of technology that we can ever think about. So, so in effect, the pyramids were there to really hold energies together, amplify energies, or manifest energies of the types that would allow us to do things like materialise things, dematerialise things, change weather patterns, create fertility, create consciousness as well. Some of the energies would enable us to create consciousness or expanded consciousness, or artificially create levels of super consciousness as well. Okay, so that's what they were there for. And there's various different pyramid sizes and shapes that were available. They have different roles and responsibilities, different ratios that have different roles and responsibilities, and they were able to attract different energy as well. Okay, so that's where I sort of picked up. And some of these pyramids, not pyramids, some of the temples that were there were simply there to guide energy as well. A little bit like some of the standing stones in the UK, around Avebury, for instance, or other areas, where a corridor of energy could be created and the stones would naturally keep the energy in a certain path. Okay, next question is from JM, and the question is, in the Yandalas, page 52, the true energetic self can have up to, but not beyond, 30% of its beingness, of its sentiences, as incarnate pieces. So if 12 is the maximum number of aspects that can be projected by our true energetic self, is it accurate to say that each one of us is a 12th of 30% of our tests? Yes. In terms of sentience, yes. Or does the test percentage vary? This makes me feel more vital than ever to the evolution of my true energetic self. Well, yeah, but basically, the standard rule is that there's a maximum of 30% of our sentience that can be projected from the true energetic self into smaller aspects, i.e. the souls. And if all 12 are projected, then it would be 2.5% of that 30% would be in each of those 12. But if there's only 3, for instance, aspects projected from a true energetic self, it is possible that a true energetic self may desire to assign 10% of its 10% of its sentience into each of those 3 aspects that is projected. So rather than having 2.5%, they can have 10% of the true energetic self's sentience. But that's when an aspect has to do some serious work on Earth. So you'd only find that those aspects with that level of sentience on board would be incarnated. They've got a really important world or galactic role to play. Generally, we only have 2.5% of the sentience of our true energetic self. Okay. Next question is, again, on the Andals on page 59, next to the bottom paragraph it says, how exactly does one move into an event space? Is it like joining a volunteer group to be of service? If so, how is that activity joining an event space? Are we ever aware that we're constantly moving or joining an event space? Or is it an accident of life choices that we make? Event space is a bit like realities, a bit like parallel conditions. We generally have a number of choices to make in our existence, in our daily existence, in our monthly existence, in our yearly existence. And depending upon the influences around us, we either make a decision which is based upon going in one particular direction, a mainstream direction, or another direction. For example, that gives you three choices. Sometimes we have 12 choices. Sometimes we have 2 choices. So moving into an event space is something that happens as a result of our choices and our decision processes when we have a decision to make. And we can move into a new event space, or we can continue to move in the existing event stream within the event space. Event streams will be described in the curators, by the way. So it's very difficult for us as human beings to actively know that we're moving into a different event space, except that we can suggest that if we have a decision to make and we make a decision, then although we may not experience anything specific or dramatic, we would know that we've moved either into a new event space that is relevant to that decision process, or we've decided to stay in the existing event stream within the existing event space that we're in, and therefore we're continuing along the same line. And so really it's to do with our decision processes. If we were an entity that is working on the maintenance of the multiversal environment, like a curator for instance, then we can move into event space by choosing an event that is parallel to or linked with the start of event in another event space. So our end of event needs to be something which is compatible with the start of event in another event space. Okay, I'll say that again. The end of event in the current event space that we're in, if we move from one event space to another, needs to be compatible with the start of event in the next event space. So there has to be a link between them. There has to be something that links them together. And this is something that the curators do. If they manipulate event space, various different realities, to ensure that the opportunities for evolutionary efficiency are maintained. And they have to work with those individuals who are working within that particular event space and event stream to ensure that they do work in a way which means that the links between the end of event in the one event space and the beginning event in the new event space, which is reasonably linear, I suppose, is compatible with each other. Okay, so that a conscious move would only be achievable for us if we were a curator. We are a maintenance entity, one of the sources maintenance entities. The only way we know we're moving to a different event space is if something dramatic happens where we change direction dramatically. Then we know we're moving to a different event space because it was not where we expected to go. And if it's not where we expected to go, then that's the sign that says you've moved into a new event space. Okay. Last question from JM is, in the History of God, page 10, second paragraph, the rocks were special because of something they could do by allowing the transference of energies. And in the Bible, I think it's Luke 19:40. Jesus is quoted as saying, "The rocks would cry out if the people remained quiet." How common is it for seemingly inanimate objects to be able to do things? Can rocks really cry out, or is it just a figure of speech? Let me just ask the question on this. Right, in terms of the Luke 19:4T, and Jesus quoted as saying the rocks would cry out if people remain silent or people remain quiet, it's simply a figure of speech saying that if something is wrong, And if something is happening in the wrong way, and nobody mentioned it, then it would be so obvious that the Earth would say something about it, basically. And we're getting that a little bit now, aren't we, with some of the things that are happening in various different locations around the world with various different leaders. Some of the things that are happening, and nobody's saying anything about it, because they're either so dumbstruck that it's happening, or they are just going with it, basically. But if there's something that is so radically wrong or so radically incorrect that it needs to be talked about or needs to be said or needs to be identified as being wrong, and nobody does identify it as being wrong, then the Earth will create some response or some environmental response that will make us sort of take notice to realise that it's wrong. And that's the metaphoric statement there. The rocks in page 10 of the History of God really have the ability to transfer energies and some of the sentience associated with energies. They have, I'm being told, transition lines within them that are not specifically low frequency. They're high frequency, but the manifestation of the rocks being low frequency makes us think that they're low frequency, and therefore they're static like rocks. But inside them there's like a matrix or network of energies that are high frequency that allows other energies or other sentience to move through them. And so there are those beings who are sentients that move around and exist within rock type structures, and their environment is these rock type structures or sand based structures as well. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. We have a few more from ME, again over in the Western Hemisphere. And ME says, thank you very much for being of service. Thank you for saying thank you. I have a question based on last Satsanga regarding how we interpret good feelings and the information from what people call past lives into what some call genetic memory. The actual question is in bold, but much more commentary on the Great Satsanga. But much commentary on the Satsanga resonated with me. Okay, so this is a bit of a preamble first. I'll go through the preamble, and then we'll go through the question. In the last Satsanga, I discussed the point of an incarnation is to essentially evolve to the point that we no longer need to incarnate by mastering incarnation itself. True. This is something that completely resonates with me, and I feel that in this lifetime I've realised that I no longer need it. I no longer see the desire in coming back. I have a feeling that this is the last trip for me in this lifetime, and I'm looking forward to that in many ways. Not morbid, but rather seeing the weight of incarnation for what it is, looking forward to a lighter existence that makes any sense. Looking forward to utilising more of my faculties that are tied up in my true and authentic self, that human form cannot cope with, things of that nature. Being in a different role as a guide or helper or structural component of the multiverse, I feel that my incarnations as humans or other forms of life have been to accrue knowledge that will assist in my more full-time role in my true and authentic self, which I feel is something like a bridge maker or a gap jumper capacity, but I have no idea where that is coming from. It just came to me in my mind as I typed this. It yet resonates also with my various roles as a human being in this lifetime. I have lived through many things you mentioned in this lifetime, and I presume in other lifetimes, since I have a feeling of understanding that can only come from having experienced life in that form. Animals, gaseous states of energy, elemental forms of energy, human forms of energy, plant forms of energy. So, that's sort of showing that there's a resonance there between the the understanding of what the greater reality is, and the feeling of and the resonance with that as an individual aspect incarnate in a human form. So really the question is this: I have wondered if those experiences are transferred or carried into each incarnation through some form of genetic memory, although it is more like a genetic concurrent association of states or forms of matter. Since all things happen in tandem, yet we experience them in linearity with time due to our slow stroke low position in the frequencies. So I think that RNA might have a role in carrying, but might also be turning on like a gene once the incarnate being hits a certain frequency, as my role as gap jumper. I'm also looking to bring science and spirituality through science understanding applied to spirituality, similar to your spiritual physics, but more biology-based than physics. Does RNA Does RNA serve a role in collective memory of other incarnates? What some have called genetic memory. If so, how is this co-translated, and why do some incarnate beings have the receptors, so to speak, for this memory, and is that tied to their level of frequency? My understanding is there's nothing physical that is used in the ability to remember past lives or have gut feelings about individuals we've worked with before. It is simply recognition of the energetic signature of that individual, or a momentary increase in frequency that allows us, so this is a personalized increase in frequency, that allows us to access part of our true energetic self and or ourselves and what we've experienced in previous existences, that allows us to therefore remember certain lives or certain aspects of certain lives. There's nothing physical about it. The physicality of us is basically a vehicle. I mean, even though we have the RNA programming the DNA, and the RNA has a function both on the physical level and the spiritual levels, there is no other link between that vehicle and what our aspect has experienced in previous incarnations. It is simply a function of frequency. And if we increase our frequencies, we'll remember more and more about what we've done in the past, and we'll be able to access more and more functionality associated with those frequencies that we're attaining. And that's my understanding. People can say it's going to court that they can say it's a genetic memory. It's more of a spiritual memory. It's more of an energetic memory that we sort of lose the ability to communicate with because we come into a low frequency environment through incarnation, but we regain when we become disincarnate. But if we enter into some form of, for want of a better word, higher frequency state through meditation, through constantly working on ourselves, or simply being born of a higher frequency, we can start to remember some of those experiences we've had, not only in this particular environment, that being the earthly environment, but also other environments within the multiverse, and also other planets within this particular universal environments within the multiverse as well. So I hope that answered the question. There's a bit more at the end to sort of finish off, and the text goes like this: I have gone from the need to evolve to the need to exist, back to the need to evolve, to understand, to the understanding of not needing either. In other words, doing versus being, or as I like to say, I've heard others say, we go into this life in a song, dooby-dooby-dooby-doo-doo-doo, for instance, hopefully landing on the uncontented understanding of not needing to do either. Being content with what you have, where you are, and not seeing the need for competition or seeing things in the winning stroke, losing mindset, but more of the ebb and flow system. It's so refreshing to see this come out in the Satsanga, and a wonderful reminder for me. Thank you. It's the most important thing is that if we strive for something, it's usually because we're supposed to experience the product of that striving. And that's usually when you see somebody who is single-mindedly going for a specific career, for instance. Somebody who wants to be a famous doctor or a famous consultant or an explorer or scientist, or he's supposed to be a chief executive officer of Amazon, for instance. Those sorts of things. They are immersed in their incarnation, and so they know what they've got to do, and they will strive for that. But when you're more aligned to a more high frequential type of living, then you tend to see past the need for striving. All you see then is the need to be able to work with the challenges and the responsibilities that we've come into this incarnation to work with. And so we go about our daily business knowing that whatever we're doing on behalf of God, because we're doing stuff that we are doing, but on behalf of God, who wants to experience that which we're experiencing to us. And so we do the best we can do to experience it in the most responsible and most complete way we can do, making the experience, the experience of the experience as efficient as a way as possible. So really, it's about, you know, doing our roles and responsibilities, but also doing the best we can do to get back to a higher frequency and understand who and what we are whilst we're incarnate as well. Again, there are some individuals who haven't chosen that in this particular lifetime, so they won't. They're the people who are the so-called, you know, material world successes, for instance. But somebody who is content with who and what they are, and they are happy with their lot, and they're happy to work on themselves, for instance, and meditate, they are, you know, they're also successful. In fact, in some ways, they're more successful than those who are materially successful. In fact, I would say they always are more successful. Okay, so I hope that explains that as well. The final one's from Dan. And Dan says, I love listening to you on the World Satsanga. I always learn new things from a cosmic perspective you're sharing. Thank you. I've noticed actually in this particular set of questions, I've included the thank yous a bit more. There's not much. I hope there's no ego in there. It's just I just think I just left them in by accident. Never mind. It's nice to see. It's nice to see people enjoying them, because if we enjoy something, we learn faster. If we don't enjoy something, we don't learn so fast. So it's nice to enjoy something. So actually, this is probably the reason for me leaving these in, is to see that people are enjoying themselves learning about the greater reality, as I do. I enjoy learning about it as well. So it's fantastic. So the question is based upon the reader of some raw material channeled by Carla Ruckert. He would like to know if this material is valid. And the question is, I would like to know what you think of this material, or what material, in your view, is the best explanation of metaphysics. That's a difficult question, because it's a moving feast. I'm just going to ask the question about the validity of Carla Ruckert and the work she does. It's called the raw material. Right, the information I've got back is that the information's reasonable, but there's a lot of holes in there. And as human beings, we tend to try to fill the holes, because we do. We tend to try to fill the holes because we get embarrassed if we have got holes there. We like to think we've got the answers to everything, and this is where the ego sneaks into it. And rather than saying that there's lots of little gaps in here, lots of holes, and I've got this is the sort of picture, but it actually looks like a sieve, because there's that many holes, that all you can do is say, well, it looks like it could be this. It looks like it could be this is how people existed in those days. This is the technology they had, rather than saying, well, based upon this, I can make this assumption. This is what's happening. So it's reasonable material. The information being given in a way that Ms. Ruckert can understand. It's the level of detail is also relevant to her level of expansiveness. But again, it is very wholly, and by that means lots and lots of gaps in there. I mean, I would say that my own material is just simply a product of my own level of expansivity. And this is the thing with people who channel information, is that the entities that are working with them can only give you information based upon your level of expansivity and baseline knowledge that you can work with. And so you tend to find that the information that's being broadcast, and this includes mind, is relevant to the ability for that channeler to broadcast what they've experienced. There are a number of times when I experience something personally in the work I'm doing, and I understand it on a really fundamental level, but I struggle to put it into words because there aren't words to describe it. And when I do get words, it is usually just about enough to make it make sense. So there are times when I get some good explanations, and there are times when it takes a long time for the information to come out, or there's times when I've got a little bit of a shadow of what's there as well. It just depends upon the detail that's there and the level of our own vocabulary that we've accrued in this particular incarnation. The vocabulary isn't the spoken vocabulary, of course. It's the total vocabulary of our experiences, what we've experienced through vision, through speech, through hearing, through smell, through taste, through touch, through mental fortitude, through mental exercise as well, and conscious exercise. So it's a whole gamut of different things. But I would say that it's this particular piece of information should be used as a broadening exercise to give you an understanding that there are other ways of understanding the details, but those other ways are usually based upon the ability of the channeler to assimilate that knowledge. So I hope that helps in that particular question. It's a good question, actually, and I would say that with everybody, when you're reading any piece of information, mine, Dolores, Eckhart Tolle's, Neil Walsh's, Carla's, all these other people that are out there, Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, all these other people out there who are doing lots of excellent work. Take the bits and pieces that are there that resonate with you, and create your own picture, because your picture will be more complete for you than a bit of a picture from another author. So sometimes you need to just take bits and pieces from different authors or from different information sources to get one that works for you based upon your own experiential data set or language set. Okay, so that's the last of the questions. Let's have a look at the meditation. So meditation is to recreate communion and negate our desire for separation throughout the world. Okay, this is really designed to help us get back into stopping individualising ourselves, stop splitting up. Brexit is one function of us wanting to become individualised again. The Catalonia thing as well is in Spain, another thing about wanting to split up and become individualised again. Having wars is another function of wanting to split up and not becoming in communion. So what we can do in this particular meditation is create a feeling of magnetism between us all, a desire for us all to work together and be together. Okay. When I was in Egypt, I went diving. I like diving. I bumped into a group of guys from Cairo, and they're really open guys. They're all Muslim, and we just chatted about various different things. I didn't tell them what I did. I just gave them my thought processes about what we should be doing globally, and that we should be working together for the common good, not for the individualised good. And they were really open to this idea that that one particular religion isn't the be-all and end-all. It's just a different teacher's understanding of how to work with the greater reality and how to connect with it. It's just that mankind has really sort of destroyed that particular original understanding and created if you like, a way of saying one way is better than the other, or one way is correct and the other way is not. And it's all to do with human ego, nothing to do with the original teachings of the original teacher. And so the idea we talked about everything being correct, everything's being correct if it's understood properly, and the source of all religions is basically different teachers understanding how to become self-realised and how to commune with source or our Trinity selves. And there's various different ways of doing it. And we all agreed that it was really good that there was that you know, there was me. I'm not assigned to Christianity or anything like that. I'm a spiritual person, rather, world spiritual person, if I like to think, rather than being somebody who's specifically aligned to one particular religion. And so being able to communicate with these people who were, they were really quite devout Muslims, but they were able to understand a different concept and take it on board and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. And so we had some great discussions in between diving, and I'm keeping in contact with these guys via WhatsApp. Some of these social medias are very good at doing that. And if I ever go over there again, I'll try and link up with them, because they really did show that they were more than capable, more than able to be expansive enough to be able to take on board the greater reality, and they can still practice their religion as well, which is what it's all about. You can practice religion if you want to, but also you can expand your knowledge base as well. So this feeling of communion rather than separation was what I really felt when I was over there with these guys, and it was really quite an uplifting feeling for me to be able to work with them. Even though we were just talking about various different things around us, and we were showing how we were all saying how we can't believe certain things are happening, and it's complete nonsense that is happening. Some of the ways certain world leaders are going, for instance, and how we're interacting with each other. We all really agreed that we should be operating in a really mature way and think of ourselves as a world economy where there's no, we don't have abject poverty and abject richness. We have everything working for the betterment of all of the citizens, education, wealth, so to speak, ability, roles or jobs. We should all be working on the same sort of level playing fields, rather than one person being better than somebody else, for instance. We should be working together for the betterment of the incarnate population as a whole, rather than little pockets around the world. So it was a great discussion. So back to this meditation. So let's sit in our straight backed chair with our feet flat on the ground, palms uppermost on the upper thighs, back straight with the small the back in the right angled aspect of our straight backed chair. Eyes closed but focused upon the origin of the third eye. Okay. So let's slowly just visualize ourselves in orbit above the Earth. Down below us we see the Earth with its ocean and its land masses and weather systems rotating below us. And as the Earth rotates below us, I want you to visualize how the Earth looks when we are looking at the Earth from orbit, but the Sun is behind it. So it's not illuminated from behind us, it's illuminated from behind the Earth. And this means that we see the Earth and the cities, land masses, in a rather interesting way. You can see all the lights in the cities and the suburbs that are on, street lights, car lights, or car headlights, motorbike headlights, cycle lights, the lights in houses as well. If we look at these from our orbital position and we zoom into a certain country and then a city and then a suburb, we see all these lights are separate. In between each light is a dark area. And I want you to see that this sort of represents communion. The area where there's lights is where there's beings, so entities, I should say, on Earth, incarnate human beings that are in communion with each other, they're higher frequency. The gaps in the middle, the dark gaps, are areas where there's people who are not in communion, they're not in higher frequency. So the light represents lights in the cities, in the country, and the landmass, represents those individuals or groups of individuals that are working at a higher frequency, and therefore want to work together in communion. The dark gaps in the middle are individuals, entities, incarnate entities that are working outside of communion. They're working individually. So they end up being low frequency. So I want you to use your willpower now to move all of these little areas of these little pockets of life together. So when they touch each other, they become a bigger group of light. And those bigger groups group together to create bigger groups of light. And sometimes you'll have groups that group together that create an area where inside there's darkness, but where there's a wall around the darkness that is lightness. And therefore all of the darkness in between these walls of lightness also becomes light. So we have this triangulation effect, this inflationary triangulation effect, where if there's groups of individuals that are grouped together and they surround an area of darkness, then the area of darkness within their group will become light as well. Similarly, if there's groups that are trying to connect together and there's a smaller group of darkness in between them, they can project their light into that dark group, creating a light group, and that newly enlightened group will connect the first light group to the second light group. This is called directional triangulation. First one was inflational triangulation, this one's called directional triangulation. So as we work with this world map of light and start to use our willpower to bring the little groups of lights together, we see that the areas of darkness in between the light starts to disappear. The lightness represents communion or working together. The darkness represents being out of communion or working from the point of view of the individual only. So work harder and harder, and faster, at making sure all these groups of light move together. All the dark areas in between the groups of light become illuminated because they become trapped in between all these groups of light. And so your map of the earth, excuse me, that was darkness with little patches of white light, starts to become more and more full of white light with little patches of darkness. So what we're creating now is an area where on the earth, in all areas, everything is high frequency. We're all working together in communion, and even those who weren't start to because of the influence of those around them. Looking back at our map of the world from the orbit in darkness, we see that there is no evidence anymore of any darkness in between or inside the groups of lightness. Everything is light. All entities are working together. All entities are working for the benefit of all other entities. All entities are in service to other entities. All entities are working for the benefit of the group, the big group, the Earth group. Every time an entity does something, it considers the effect it has on the big group. If a group of entities start to think of a new change, and there's enough of them, then the whole group is considered as to whether that change is valid or not. So there's no dissent as to whether we go with the change or not. The whole group, the whole of the earth would take on board this new change and direction. There'd be no arguments, no condescension, no alternative viewpoints, no desires to not follow or go the same way. There would only be understanding at the most profound level that what's being decided by a smaller group would benefit the much larger group, and therefore the much larger group would take on board the thoughts or the desires of the smaller group. And so we have a whole landmass on Earth that is whether it's the Americas, whether it's Europe, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Australasia, and all the bits in between. They are all covered in white light because every entity in all of these different countries and their boundaries and their neighbouring boundaries are working for the benefit of them all and not just their own country. And so the whole of the earth becomes illuminated because all the entities on board the earth are working for the benefit of the environment that they're in, because the environment supports them and therefore they're working for the benefit of the earth. See and maintain, record this image of all the earth, all the earth's land masses being one bright light. Everyone works for the benefit of everybody else. Everybody works in communion. Everybody works for the benefit of the whole. So seeing every landmass on the earth as being a bright light, we can start to move away from that imagery. Slowly come back into the room where we are. We'll be sitting in our straight backed chair. Slowly open our eyes. Take a drink of water or other liquid to help ground us. And that meditation will, although it's very simple, it's to do with raising frequencies really, and therefore it creates communion through the raise in the frequential state of individuals and groups in between, individuals in between groups, and individuals in the middle of groups at a higher frequency. And so everything creates communion and the desire for the communal state rather than separation. So that's the end of this particular Satsanga in November. The next Satsanga I'm going to say is going to be on the 23rd of December. That's the day before Christmas Eve. And I'm going to say it's 23rd because this will be the 10th. Start again. This is the 5th anniversary of my late wife Anne's transition back into the energetic, because it within the first half hour of 2014, and certainly 2012, get it right, of the 24th of December 2012, she moved back into the energetic, and the whole of the 23rd of December 2012 I spent with her, and the Satsanga before then we all grouped together to give her lots of energy to make her transition as quick and as fast as possible. And so we will have a Satsanga, I think, on the 23rd of December, which is the 5th anniversary of Anne's transition, and we're going to work on giving energy to all those individuals who need to move on back to the energetic as well. So the whole point of the meditation is to help others pass quickly. Well, thank you very much for listening to this Satsanga and participating. Don't forget that all of your energies focus on this particular event space. You move into this event space when you listen to this particular Satsanga, and that creates a synergistic effect where we all work together. So thank you to everybody who's listening to it, those who are in the far west and those in the far east and those in the middle as well. And we give you God's love, this obviously the love of the source and the origin, and my love as well. And I look forward to creating the Satsanga in December. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Did you see the aliens in Crete?